Hello, everybody. And hi, Görkem.
Hello.
Great to have you here.
Thank you so much.
To maybe start a conversation and set the stage a little bit, I wanted to give a quick introduction. Görkem, you grew up in Turkey, and you went to United States for undergrad, worked at AWS for 7 years before starting Fall. And Fall, for those who didn't know, is a generative media company and fastest inference engine for image, video, audio models. And at this point, you have over 600 models on the platform and can scale up to thousands of images generated per second. A lot of people know about Fall now, but you actually had relatively a different starting point. How did you start the company? What was the founding story? And how did you navigate from the data to generative AI pivot?
Yeah, actually what inspired me to start the company was my relationship with my co-founder, Burkay. I would say his decision to quit his job and start a company was one of the biggest catalysts for me to come and join him. And we had some ideas on what kind of spaces we want to explore. This was during COVID times, so we had rented a house in Palm Springs and tinkered on some ideas right before we decided to start a company. So we knew there was some chemistry between us. I would say before even deciding on an idea, I really believed in the founder chemistry, and that's why we decided to start a company together. And then in the beginning, we worked on the data space or traditional machine learning space. We tinkered around some ideas with data transformation. At the time, it was a very saturated market. Maybe there wasn't enough space for a small startup to come in and make a difference. And 1 year into our journey, basically everything changed. First, it was DALL-E, and then Stable Diffusion a couple months later, and then a couple months later, ChatGPT. AI kind of changed how developers interact with models. And the biggest difference, I would say, is before you had to work at big companies like Stripe, Airbnb, Spotify, to actually have enough user data to train a model yourself and actually use it in production. But with these big off-the-shelf models like Stable Diffusion, developers are, from day zero, can build a product on top of the pre-trained AI model. And we thought that was a huge paradigm shift. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for startups to actually play a part in this ecosystem. And we pivoted from data transformation to inference.
I was there during the pivot, and actually when I invested in Fall, it was a very different company in the data space. And actually, I would say you had early product market fit was the first idea, and it was open source, and you were able to build a community around that. It's always hard to pivot, but it's even harder to pivot once you have something that's already sort of working, and to a space you have completely unknowns. Like 2-3 years ago, there wasn't really this concept called generative media. It's like generative images, it's DALL-E, it's Stable Diffusion. So what gave you the conviction to have the pivot, and what's been the most challenging effort in that whole
as you said, it's especially hard if you have paying customers, investors, a community building on top of your product to actually move away from that. And I remember at the time, we were trying to convince ourselves, okay, maybe this pivot is not as big of a pivot as we think it is. And we were trying to convince ourselves and our customers, our investors, that maybe this is more of a soft transition into a different market.
And you remember you were trying to convince me. I was skeptical.
And it was a mistake. I would say we lost a bunch of time because it impacts how you message. It impacts the marketing website. It impacts how you talk about your company because you send mixed messages. You still talk about the all data transformation world, but then there's some AI and inference involved, and those two don't make a very clear story. I wish we were more clear from the beginning and decided to pivot right away and made a hard transition. But I would say we lost 3-4 months staying in between, trying to do two things at the same time and sending mixed messages to our potential customers and existing customers. So that made it really hard. But what convinced us was some of our first customers were using Stable Diffusion, and we saw that they were doing the same thing over and over again, trying to productionize these models. And we identified that the models were running very, very slow, and we were able to actually dig in and optimize the inference speed for our customers. And we made a very easy to use API that is multi-tenant, that is much cheaper than hosting on your own. And we had great success with just a single API endpoint, and our revenue maybe was 10x bigger than, in 1 month, 10x bigger than the previous product. And the signs were there, so we decided to pivot completely. Yeah.
To that point, so one thing maybe share for the audience for context, even though the market is completely different from like running data pipelines to running generative models, the underlying infrastructure is quite similar. It's both Python workloads that you can already run on the platform, but very much purpose-built for running generative images or video models. What I found interesting is, even since the beginning when you started this dbt file project, it was in a very busy market, as you mentioned. It was sort of the Airflow sort of data transformation market, but you were able to always like break out of the noise and have very small company and like no brand name known by the public. Because I got to know you at the conference when you wrote the unbundling of Airflow article, and then when you enter into this general media market, it was also starting to be more crowded, but you were always able to break out this noise. Is it luck? Is it skill? Or is it just sheer amount of hustle to educate the market and audience?
Yeah, marketing for developers is extremely hard. A lot of the traditional marketing techniques don't work for developers because they find it cringe, they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to understand complicated messaging. It needs to be simple, but yet engaging. And you can only do that with deeply technical content, and unbundling of Airflow was one of those where it was technical, but it was general at the same time, so a lot of people resonated with it. And that's what we did when we decided to work on image inference as well. A lot of people, the consensus view at the time was there were going to be these general purpose inference platforms. If you are running LLM inference, you'll be able to run image inference as well, or recommendation systems, any kind of inference you are doing. Early on, we identified the image and video market to be a separate market with different buyers, different way to talk about it, different marketing strategies, and we called it generative media. We are one of these lucky companies that we were able to actually name the market we are operating in. And that turned out to be a really powerful positioning for us because when I look back, any of the companies that we are selling to, they are uniquely buyers of image and video models, and maybe they have little LLM usage here and there, but it's very obvious when a company is using LLM models or image and video models, these markets are completely distinct. And this is one of the things that we identified early on, and it worked great for us.
Talking about naming the category and defining the market you're operating in, I was very impressed by this generative media term, and you also just through your first conference, GMC, Generative Media Conference in San Francisco. It's interesting because File itself is not an open source company, but you very much is a central player in the open source ecosystem because you host and run a ton of open source models. You're like always on the front line of knowing what the next model is coming, and also like provide inference and compute back to the community and sponsoring sort of a lot of startups trying to develop fine-tuned models. How do you think sort of that open source roots help you to build this community, and what that has helped with the company's success?
Yeah, File is the best place to run open source models, and we are extremely on top of it. So we try to get day zero access to any new open source release. Most of the time nowadays, we know in advance, so we can prepare, make sure we have a scalable playground from day zero. We have good examples, and anyone who's building on a new open source model can just come to File, and from day zero, they can build it. And this ties back to the developer-facing marketing that I was talking about. Because these releases are happening so often, in any week, we have 2 or 3 releases of new models we are tweeting about, we are writing about on our blog, and this creates another touch point for us to engage with the community, to talk to our users. And again, it's usually marketing teams manufacture ways to find touch points with their customers, but every model release is a new touch point for us, new opportunity to go out there and talk to our customers. And we've been using it very effectively. We make sure we are the fastest one to release the model. We make sure everything is reliable and scalable from right away. And we make sure to have a nice guide on how to use the model from day 0. And these things have been resonating with the community. And it compounds, because next time a model is released, the model developers actually get in contact with us and tell us about their release, so we are more prepared, and developers expect that we will be the first one releasing it, so it increases the brand value and creates this moat around our brand and developer ecosystem. Yeah.
For sure. People today come to Fall when they want to launch a new model. They want to access the millions of developers you have on the platform. And even closed source models come to Fall to co-market, like launch the models together. But tell us, in the early days when you're not as big or known as today, like how do you catch up to like a new model release or a new open source? Like how do you set up the team, like who are working on monitoring the community when the model comes out, like trying to be that first one launching the model on the platform?
I think this is true for any startup. In the early days, you have to be known for one single thing that you are best at. For us, this was speed and inference performance, basically. And we obsessed over getting #1 spots in the public benchmarks. And people got to know us that maybe we weren't the biggest inference player in the market, but we consistently ranked #1 in the benchmarks. And that's how people know about us. And it's very measurable thing to compare yourself with, and we kept talking about it, and people know us about that and came to the platform to access the fastest inference speeds. But nowadays, as you said, we try to build more reasons for people to come to the platform. Early access to models is one. Accessing the widest variety of the models is another one. Nowadays, you can also build custom deployments on Fall and access our inference engine. So now there are like 5-6 reasons why a developer would be coming to Fall and building on our platform. And this compounds and creates a bigger moat around, first, which started as a technical differentiation, but now it turned into a business differentiation.
Definitely, definitely. And you have had some really great talent on the team, including the Fall guy in the audience, Batuan, that's able to make GPUs really run at its maximum, and that's how you get the best performance and inference time for very new and even challenging models. So I think that's also another very differentiated factor.
And nowadays we have our own internal framework. When a new model comes out, if it's an architecture we know about, it usually takes us less than an hour to put an initial version of that model, and that's usually optimized, I would say, 80% to 90% of the way. And then we spend the latest, maybe rest of the day or maybe a couple days to get the latest 10% and optimize that. And that's, in the beginning, everything was manual, but nowadays there's a whole internal framework and library that we are using. And if you are deploying custom models on the platform, you get access to this framework as well. So that has become a big advantage for our customers as well.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's pivot the conversation into what we're seeing in the market, because I really think the general media market is such an interesting one because it's serving so many different audiences, from developers, from individual creators, because there's the workflow builder that individual creators use to generate sort of their own style of images and video. And there are enterprises now that's coming to Fall platform trying to use it for commerce purposes, for marketing, for advertising, and really, like 2025 was the year you guys called out of like the mainstream video going mainstream year. So tell us a bit more of like what are some of the interesting and new use cases or like iSkill use cases you're seeing today?
Yeah, I wouldn't take credit of identifying this perfectly when we first started, but I would say generative media was a perfect industry for a startup to actually make a difference. And it is a cliche advice to find a small but fast-growing market when you are starting a company. And generative media was truly one of those. When it first started, people thought, all right, is this a toy? Are they going to be enterprise use cases? People were skeptical, but very soon it was very clear that people are going to use it for marketing, for filmmaking, for advertising, for fashion, for design and creativity. All of a sudden, the use cases and the surface area of the industry exploded. One of the other reasons why it was a perfect fit for a startup like ours was because there is no clear incumbent. We are not going against Google or anyone who's clearly losing market share in this. But also, we were...
Everyone's pie is growing.
Yes, everyone's pie is growing. It's a greenfield market where we are defining the market as the company grows. But also there's an uncertainty. It's not very clear what are the use cases are going to be in a year. Models are improving so fast that we might be leapfrogging very established, for example, photography and filmmaking use cases, right? We might end up at a point where we are past filmmaking as we know of, and all of this is happening extremely fast, and there's a lot of uncertainty around it. So we are very nimble. We are able to change direction and listen to our customers very fast, but some of the more established players, it takes them more time to realize where the industry is going.
Definitely. That's the benefit of being a startup, is you can pivot where the wind is blowing, and as long as you can execute, you can go there much faster. So some of the, actually yesterday was the first time that I knowingly have watched like an 8-minute fully generated cartoon video. I've seen many of those like at a much shorter time, and that's like one of the use cases I know some customers are using about today. And the virtual try-ons, like I used to use Warby Parker to try on glasses, but that was just not like realistic.
It didn't feel real,
Right, exactly. But now the virtual try-ons looks, very much fitting to like your body shape, your style. Those are some use cases I know that people are using Fall for. Is that sort of the biggest use cases you're seeing, or there are other ones too?
Yeah, so you mentioned our conference, which was 2 weeks ago. I got to interview Jeffrey Katzenberg, the ex-CEO of DreamWorks and Disney Studios. And one thing really stuck with me. He compared the current landscape of AI filmmaking with computer animation in the mid-90s. He got a lot of heat because he was pushing computer animation back in the day, but it turned out now like some of my favorite movies are animated movies like Shrek, Toy Story, How to Train Your Dragon, and there was a lot of backlash from the creatives at the time. They tried to resist technology, but he put it in a way that like there's no way resisting technology. This is gonna happen either way. And he thought it's very similar to that time. And now, like computer animated films, there's 1 or 2 films every year that is ranked #1 in the rankings. So we can expect something similar with AI as well. It's going to blend into filmmaking, and we are going to look back in a couple of years, and it's going to all feel normal.
Yeah, I love How to Train Your Dragon so much that I even named my daughter after the princess. And I wish there were more How to Train Your Dragons out. There's only like two movies. Hopefully with the generative media and a lot of the video models, we can make these type of movies faster.
And animation is a great avenue for AI to make a difference, because I don't see a point of making realistic movies with AI. Like we already have very, very good cameras. We already have filmmaking techniques that we are able to do emotion and realism very well. But animation adds another layer of storytelling on top of it. And I think that's the reason why people love animated movies so much, because it's not realistic. So AI would do a great job there.
Right.
Animation, or it can even be something else that we don't have a definition for, that's interactive, but also animated.
Yeah, maybe not fan fiction, but fan movies.
Fan movies,
Yes. Yeah. So I want to ask, given you see pretty much all the models coming out and like pushing the limits on the capabilities, like are we at the peak of the model capabilities yet for image and videos? And if not, what are still missing in the current landscape?
One thing that's happening in the market in the past 2 years is everything is extremely fragmented. I would say the best video model changes month to month. Best image model changes maybe even shorter periods. And even defining the best video model is hard because models are good at different things. It's very surprising to me that the best image model is not even the best image editing model. So people have a lot of different models for a lot of different use cases. We had this very surprising statistic. In the top 100 users on FAL, on average, they are using 14 different models meaningfully.
14 different models.
14 different models. So this is multiple image editing models, multiple video models, upscalers, background removers. So because the problem space is very general, models haven't been able to generalize as well as it generalized on the LLM side. So there's a lot of fragmentation and diversity in the model space, and the most high-performing models keep changing. It's good for us because we are always on top of it, and a lot of people come to us to access all of these at the same time, but also makes it challenging to keep up with all the developments. And you asked about, like, okay, is this the top? How fast things are improving? It looks like things are going to keep improving. And I have two reasons for it. Number one, we have a lot of data available for us. I think we have more video data than compute to train on this. So we are not running out of video data to create bigger, better models. But also, so far, researchers have done like the simplest thing possible. They captioned images or captioned video and trained models with the captioner. And now they are doing more complicated stuff that requires more data transformation, more engineering with the editing models. And the capabilities of those models, there's a lot of room for improvement. So a lot of engineering resources will go into it. So I expect those models to improve greatly in the next year or so.
I definitely agree with that. We like to use this analogy that for media models or creative models, it's more like walking into a bookstore. You have different genres, just like you watch movies. Some people like more action, like more anime, and the model's trained with a specific style going into it. So there's more of a distinction of which model is good for what. And even like for the workflow you're talking about, there's like the best upscaler models. There's like the best, again, like facial expression. Like you just want to have as much expressiveness from each different models and like really tailor it towards that use case for.
On the cost side, there's very varying different models as well. People usually like to work with the most expensive best model, but they also prefer good enough cheap model as well. And these models keep changing, but they always prefer a couple different cost structures in terms of which models they are building products with. And sometimes, let's say, for example, if they like one of the good enough but cheap model, they don't change it, they just add on top of it because they like the personality of that model, because they have so many workflows, for example, working. So some of these old models are sticking around and new ones are being added into the products.
Definitely, definitely. I want to end the chat with a little bit of advice, given at the core and center, FAL is still like a developer platform, and you do a great job in tailoring and targeting developers and technical audience.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for the audience if they're building for developers, building for technical audience? Like how do they find a market, launch into it, grow in that?
From very early on, me and my co-founder, we wanted to build for developers because that's how we increase our impact and amplify it. We build for developers, other very smart developers build products on top of what we build, and that's how our impact is amplified. And in the age of AI, I would say it's very easy to fall into this trap of thinking what might happen in 2 years or 3 years with the model advancements. But usually people get stuck there, and it's hard to get out of that mentality. I would recommend working on something that works right now. And because you get these short windows of opportunity where the models are good enough, there is enough space in the market that you can come in and really make a difference as a startup. So I would recommend people to focus on things that works right now and build right away on those ideas.
I love that. We always talk about finding a wedge as an investor. So find your wedge and then start from there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Görkem.
Thank
It's
you
great
so
chat.
much. Yeah.
Thank you all.